Yeah. So I want to welcome everyone. My name is Jenilyn Santos Ong. I am the manager of Opus, the new startup incubator focused on academic founders with deep tech inventions and innovations here on campus. My colleague Jamie Speed is here with me today as well, and she will be running the webinar and closing things off at the very end because my apologies, I do have to leave earlier than expected. But so very glad to see everyone here. And today's session is part of the entrepreneurship series from Research Excellence in partnership with Research Excellence, with Research Excellence and Innovation for the SURE program. My first time doing this intro. The SURE program, which is the Student Undergraduate Research Experience. So these sessions are aimed to support students as you consider your future career, which may or may not take you into the world of business and entrepreneurship. Either way, we've got some great speakers today, and we are finding that the entrepreneurship series are popular right across the university with staff and faculty as well as students. So because the world of academia and business are more connected than we think. We see that every day, and we hear comments like that all the time. So we are excited, me personally as well too, because I know Ben and Melody, and they're just great people, not just very professional, but fantastic people. And so do want to thank them for presenting today. And Ben Borne and Melody Lynch of SymmetryPR are going to talk to you about the advantages of branding and using storytelling to promote your brand. So over to you, Ben and Melody.
Thanks so much, Jenilyn. I appreciate you saying that academia and business have some close ties. Melody always says that I'm too academic.
Just lately, I'm like storytelling and academia, they can go together. We're going to give a little bit of background buttress for what we're saying, but also talk about like that storytelling vehicle. So
she
happy
says
medium.
Anyway, she says I'm too academic. Well, whatever. We've had a good back and forth on this, but we appreciate the space to be here. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm Ben. I'm the president and COO of SymmetryPR. So I look after kind of most of the operations side of the business. And Melody is the chief communication officer. So she looks after kind of the client side and the management of our projects. And together we both kind of work on different things, but that's how we divided up our business. So together we own SymmetryPR, which is a majority Indigenous owned communications agency or consultancy based here in Saskatoon. Right now we're a team of 2 plus a long list of Indigenous subcontractors, and together we help organizations build relationships with the various publics they serve toward advancing reconciliation initiatives in Canada. So that's kind of our general introduction. We're both certified communication management professionals, which is the CMP designation, and together we're happy to join and share about storytelling your brand. So I'm going to pull up my presentation here and make sure that we're good to go. There we go. Can everybody see that? Thumbs up. Cool. Okay. I just don't know how that Zoom works sometimes. So. Cool. All right. So
sorry.
Actually,
Ben,
I can't see it now.
Yeah.
No, can't see it.
Oh, what?
It's black now. Yeah.
Oh. See, I knew that this would be dramatic. Okay. Let's do this. There we go.
There.
You're good.
All right, cool. Thanks so much. Let's talk about storytelling your brand. I'm going to kick things off here. So what is communications? I would be curious to hear if people in the group want to type in the chat what you think, or if you want to define communications for me in kind of a few words or a sentence. What is communications? I think that would be a good start for the group. Melody can't answer.
Darn it. I had a really good one cooking.
Yeah, people want to just type in the chat a definition for communications from your perspective. See if anyone wants to give that a shot.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Exactly. Don't be shy. There's no wrong answers.
Correct.
Maybe there is. That's right. If you want to take a crack at it, that's good. I just thought I would give it a try. See, oh, effectively conveying ideas. It's sending and receiving information. Those are all really great. Any other ones out there before I hit next, where I do the grand reveal of what my definition of communications is? Right, cool. All right, let's go with the reveal. Communications is the use of messaging conveyed across any written, visual, or spoken medium to convey information and meaning. So you guys kind of pretty much summed it up right there in much fewer words than I did. Communication for me, though, is at the heart of relationship building. So that's kind of what I always say that communications is. What is organizational communication? Well, I always say it's relationship building. It's a return to the roots of human communication and persuasion that focuses on personal trust and mutual cooperation. It is also public relations, which is a word that you hear, which is defined, or I define it as strategically managing communication to build relationships and influence behavior, right? And so sometimes we hear some negative associations with our public relations. We hear terms like spin doctor or, the masters of spin, which, I wholeheartedly reject as the definition of our role. But in fact, what we do as communications professionals is we kind of span the relationship between publics and what organizations serve. We gather information from publics and we feed it up to leadership. Leadership responds to that information and changes or adjusts its business practices and its story to kind of best align with organizations or with publics to kind of work towards that personal trust and mutual cooperation to get to those mutually beneficial outcomes. So that is what organizational communications is. That's what organizational communicators do. And this is really important when it comes to talking about brand, right? So, what is brand? That's kind of the question that we need to ask. Again, in the chat, does anyone have any ideas or what brand is when I use that word? You can type in the chat, or you can raise your hand actually too and speak if you so wish. But what is your definition of what a brand is? I'll wait about a minute and see what you guys have to say. It's kind of a big, it's an entity. Yeah. Have a position. Okay. What else? Representing something or someone, potentially. Yeah. Any other? How you want to be perceived. I like that answer. Promoting a specific item. Yeah, a brand can be associated with that. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to give you the answer. No, just kidding. I'm going to tell you what some of the literature says. Brand is everything. It's actually everything that you've kind of mentioned and more. Brand is generally informed by vision and values. Brand is how people feel towards your organization, or as you said, doesn't say your name, but iPhone said it's how you want to be perceived in the chat. The brand experience engages customers, turning customers into loyal, raving fans. A brand is a heuristic cue, is what we call in kind of communication theory. It's a mental shortcut that triggers ideas, events, and feelings toward a company of products. So maybe let's do an example. Let's do a word association with this logo. This is the Apple logo. What are some words that you might have when you see this logo? Technology, Melody says. Anyone else have a word to say, or when it comes to Apple computer or their logo? What came to your mind? Apple, yeah. What about, is there anything else?
Innovative.
Innovative, tech, rich, different, high class. Yes, that's right. There's a certain status that comes with having Apple. Okay, let's go to the next slide and maybe I'll unpack it. So here's a picture of me with my iPhone. Aesthetics, yes. Look at the aesthetics of this photo. Me holding my iPhone on a black brick building, right? There's a certain aesthetic that iPhones can have, or that have an appeal when it comes to its look, right? So, when it comes to Apple, right? I remember my first iPod. It was an iPod Nano, and it was a little square, a little long rectangular one. And after I had that product, I was done in. I became a raving fan. I had iPods, iMacs, MacBooks, iPhones, Apple TVs, HomePods, Apple headphones, all of their services. I bought a car just so that I could use Apple CarPlay. I watch every product launch like it's a religious experience. It's going to church for me. I'm watching those product launches. I am fully immersed in the Apple culture. Apple brings me a sense of status, as you said, a certain aesthetic, a certain sense of belonging or connection to a project. It's truly brilliant. And Omar says it's an amazing brand, and absolutely yes, they are an amazing brand, right? But what Apple has done well is tell a story, right? It starts with, Steve Jobs starting his company in his garage, to leaving Apple after he got canned, to start Next. And then, Apple kind of fell apart. And then there's this renaissance when they acquired Next and he became the president and CEO again. And there was a comeback story. And then, there's all these kinds of narrative that they've built around their brand that kind of, has this is the story, right? When Apple announces new phones, right, they speak to consumer needs and consumer stories. At every presentation, if you watch them, they talk about, or they tell stories about how their products are used by the public, right? How watches are used for fitness tracking and how they're used for saving lives and how paramedics use them. They talk about hashtag shot on an iPhone, right? And how consumers use it, and they show photos. This is how consumers use our product, right? They are really good at telling stories about their product to sell their product, right? It's all about storytelling. Another really great example is Apple uses rituals and they use practice. So everyone can count on, a product launch in September, and that's always the iPhone, right? In 2017, another really great example of storytelling for Apple was Steve Jobs holding a funeral for Mac OS 9 at the Worldwide Developers Conference, right? They used a story and a trope that we all know or have experienced to connect, right? Connect with the audience. We all know funerals, right? And so they told a story about the end of Mac OS 9 by using a funeral, a funeral story, right? So this was not just about a product death and a product launch, but it meant death and new life for the Apple's products in the future. And once we hit Mac OS 10 or more, it was a substantial shift in the organization and the brand story they were trying to tell. Melody.
Yeah, so it's time you get to hear from me. So we talked a little bit about organizational communication. Ben talked about the need for relationship building, brand storytelling. We're starting to dip into that, but we really want to talk about what's at the core of all this, right? Which is trust. So this is an analogy from Brené Brown, one of our favorites, the marble jar. So trust is built one marble at a time, right? Or it can be taken away in an instant. So actually it's built one interaction at a time. So if you think about putting a marble inside the jar, every time that you do what you say you're going to do, or your values align with what you're doing, at every touch point, especially when you're talking along about your brand journey, you have the opportunity to either build trust in your brand or break down trust in your brand, right? So there's a definition of trust. If trust is an emotional judgment of one's credibility and performance on issues of importance, really what it comes down to is doing what you say you're going to do, having your actions align with your words, but also aligning that with your values. And that's what's going to build trust with your audiences, with your publics. So we'll go over a few quick facts on trust. I'm still working on my enunciation after my jaw surgery. Sorry about that. So by 2014, businesses held the trust advantage over government, right? And it was expected to lead the way in helping government establish and maintain an appropriate regulatory environment. By 2016, trust in all 4 institutions measured reached its highest level since the 28 recession. By 2018, trust in all 4 institutions imploded. So from the Edelman Trust Barometer, in 20 out of 28 countries surveyed, that year, average trust in institutions was less than 50%, which was remarkable. So trust plunged 23 points in the informed public, led by a decline in trust of government of 30 points. Trust in media, NGOs in the US also had significant decreases. And the 2018 survey showed a reverse in declining credibility of CEOs. And we're going to talk about the significance of that because that can be really important in brand storytelling. So some of our takeaways. This means that leveraging your CEO's personal brand has become more widely embraced and successful where done well in brand building, both inside and outside the organization. So the fact that businesses and my CEO are highly trusted individuals can be really leveraged in brand storytelling and in communicating to your audiences, right? Employees rely on information from their employers now more than ever, right? So the employer voice has more weight and also responsibility, I would say. The traditional media outlets aren't the most trusted channel anymore, right? All that fake news. However, they are still important for getting your message out, right? So, but they're not the only way. We don't have to rely on traditional media anymore. So this is one of the key takeaways I think that we can take, is it's still important to use traditional media to communicate to your target audiences, but you are more in the driver's seat than ever before, right? When it comes to storytelling your brand. So let's look at a couple examples of some good brand storytelling again here. So brand storytelling is a key vehicle to building trust, right? Companies are building trust, audience engagement, and ultimately selling products through brand storytelling like Spotify. So I love this billboard. 2018 goals: be as loving as the person who put 48 Ed Sheeran songs on their I Love Gingers playlist. I'm a ginger, so that, you know, I resonate with that. But this is an excellent example of how they're mining audience data and personalizing their communications to individuals, right? And using that for brand storytelling that builds trust and affinity with its brand. So using humor and its target audience insights, it's growing that connection to those audiences. And here's just a second example. If we go to the next slide. Dear person who played Sorry 42 times on Valentine's Day, what did you do? Right, so they're really mining data and they're making those interactions so personal. And that's where brand storytelling begins with your audiences, is who are they? Who are your audiences? What is the data telling you? That's where you want to start, right? And here's another example. So here's Airbnb. We imagine a world where you can belong anywhere, right? So Airbnb shifted its brand narrative to focus completely on people. And that includes their whole community. So that's their hosts, super hosts, the guests who stay with them. On their website, they showcase the stories from their communities. So I want to just share with you like a quick story, a brand storytelling example that was given by one of the guests who stayed with one of Airbnb's hosts. So she writes this on their website, right? She showed up at her host place. She had a super long commute. She got there, discovered she'd lost her wallet, all her credit cards, her cash, and her passport along the way. This could have been a total vacation nightmare, which I'm sure we've all had. But the host met her at the door. She had no way to pay this person. She didn't have any identification. She couldn't prove who she was, nothing. He listened and basically said, I'm going to give you a hand. I'm going to help you. Took the guest to retrace each one of their steps, going from bus stop to bus stop, the entire way along her travel route, from when she landed to when she got to their home. Visiting the bus station, had them check all the buses for her personal belongings. And the story ended with happy ending. Yay, the woman's wallet, all of her cash, credit cards, passport, everything was returned to her. And this is just one example of hundreds of stories that Airbnb facilitates. And I wanted to include this because user-driven content or user-created content like this is one of the most powerful ways to give your audience a voice and connect to those audiences, right? There are people who have vacation nightmares all over the world. They can relate to this. Or maybe they had a story like this where they had someone who was willing to go so out of their way to help them. It's a prime opportunity using this user-driven content and brand storytelling to sell their brand for them, use their communities to sell their brand for them. Ben, over to you. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. We're going to talk a little bit more about the communicator now, kind of a little through the context of the branded storytelling. So storytelling is the key function of the communicator, right? So the successful communicator uses data and insights on audience behaviors to persuade and ultimately influence or change behavior. And this is done through trust building. So how do stories build trust, right? It's how we reinforce our shared values and beliefs so we can relate to one another. Stories can create bonds based on appreciation and trust. And good stories should elicit emotion and facilitate connection. So, there's the notes there for you to take a look at. So, yeah, ultimately, the communicator is a relationship builder, and they tell your brand story with a focus on trust. So we're going to talk a little bit about the why and societal trends that define communication roles and kind of what we're seeing as we kind of move through kind of this current time in our life in terms of businesses and trust and brand storytelling, right? The first trend is increasingly segmented publics requiring alternatives to traditional media channels for the dissemination of messages. Based on audience research, less than half the population watches television shows live, right? I'm one of those people. I watch everything on streaming services now, and that number drops even lower when looking at millennials like myself. Technology has made it easier and easier to choose when and what you want to view. Sitting down every Wednesday at 7 p.m. to watch a show is no longer a realistic expectation, right? Study of audiences have also indicated that even within the groups segmented by demographics and psychographics, there are smaller segments which have been labeled interpretive communities or of differences among them in the ways they receive, interpret, and act upon messages. These shared interest groups are evidenced now in the user communities fostered through internet channels and particularly social media, right? So that's kind of the first trend. The second trend is dramatically escalating social problems that no longer affect only one fringe or marginalized groups in society, right? So the productivity of the workforce is seriously jeopardized by problems affecting families such as drug abuse, physical abuse, gun violence, gangs, teen pregnancy, and declining quality of education, or now a pandemic that we've kind of just have been seeing our way through. When such problems start to affect the lives of the employees, they threaten productivity and the wellness of the employee culture. So this has to be addressed and can only truly be addressed through a relational way of doing corporate communications, both internally and externally. The third trend that we're seeing is that the business environment has become increasingly burdened with social issues and problems that corporations have failed to control using traditional management techniques, right? Companies are forming alliances with communities, governments, and special interest groups to address societal problems. And this is really common now in kind of CSR initiatives or corporate social responsibility initiatives. These actions are done in the name of social responsibility, but a more accurate justification for the establishment of cooperative efforts is probably that corporations have been unable to solve those problems themselves and they need partners, because a lot of these things that are happening in society are starting to affect corporations and those that work for them. Societal trend number 4, business entities face a more knowledgeable and business savvy public that demands corporate commitment of resources to solve problems affecting the community as well as employees and their families, right? So more people have business degrees, more people have access to the internet, more information about businesses and behind the scenes information is available. More people have more information about business generally, right? People are aware of corporate profits, although not always aware of what that entails. They apply pressure to organizations to use the resources in socially responsible ways. And now, of course, social responsibility is trending, right? Organizations are jumping on bandwagons like Pride, like Scotiabank and Pride. That's always a joke. You see Truth and Reconciliation, Black Lives Matter. Organizations are being held accountable and are being challenged to use their power for good. The business, these actions are ostensibly in the name of social responsibility, but a more accurate justification, of course, as I said, is the establishment of cooperative efforts it's probably the corporations have been unable to solve the problems unilaterally, right? So again, corporations can't solve these problems. And so they're having to partner with communities, they're having to partner with activists, they're having to partner with people to help kind of advance both their agenda, but also the agenda of those that are holding them accountable. So there's kind of this mutually beneficial relationship that's forming and coming out of these corporate trends, right? The final trend that we're seeing is limited channels of mass media previously placed in control of information in the hands of the organization. But the proliferation of social and digital media has put much more control in the hands of the users. So there was a time when corporate communications, they had all the power when it came to disseminating information and control of the message. When Bernays started doing information dissemination type work, he's one of the founders of public relations. He had basically all the control of the media, and he himself was a journalist or someone who started out in that field, and then he could control the media, right? Or he could provide information to the media, and that information was held by the corporation, but that's now flipped on its head because of digital and social communication, right? Users have access to information and a voice than they ever had before. So another couple things and trends that we know, right? Withholding information in today's technological society is virtually impossible, right? Controlling information or the spin on information is also unlikely, with publics having many sources from which to validate and source information. And this makes misinformation and disinformation from external sources a significant concern for organizations. And we see these words kind of buzzing around now a lot in the news, right? So misinformation, is information that is unintentionally inaccurate or misleading, and disinformation is information that is intentionally accurate or misleading, right? Building trust-based relationships with publics is the only approach that results in sustained credibility. Essentially, we in communications and marketing must think about our publics in terms of these strategic communities, which we'll touch on next, right? And some of the authors in the space contends that we have to approach our public's strategic cooperative communities, or as strategic cooperative communities, focusing on relationship-based interaction among all members of a community to achieve individual and collective goals. And so Mel is now going to talk about strategic cooperative communities.
Yeah, so strategic cooperative communities, or the strategic cooperative communities model, is just one way of approaching corporate communications, right? But also the role it plays in community building. So there's 5 characteristics that we want to look at as part of these cooperative communities. And the first characteristic is they have a long-range vision. So companies are looking to the long term rather than identifying key audiences and critical issues by their immediate effect on their organization. So they're not doing that. Companies are identifying rather all potential audiences and systematically and strategically establishing relationships to identify the issues that will be critical in the next century, as opposed to just the next few years or decade. So that long range vision is a really important characteristic of these communities. Characteristic number 2, see, I'm getting a little academic here. You can see that. This is me and Ben together on this part. Commitment to community. This is really critical, I think, understanding where things are at in terms of organizations. So companies do have a commitment to community and not just to profit now, right? So companies involved in the community are often led by a CEO who's also very committed to that work. Commitment at that high level gives the organization community involvement strength and integrity, right? Because it's based on a sincere commitment and intent and desire to serve that community, and not just for profit alone. It's understood that's what's good for or improves the community will also eventually benefit the organization, right? So the communities who are doing this well and are doing it sincerely and aligning their values and brand telling that story, right, of them being out there doing that, they're doing really well because they're doing it with sincerity, and they're doing it not just to get a profit. Third characteristic, organizational values, emphasizing the importance of people, right? So we hear a lot about the importance of people and people first. So underlying that commitment to community is this emphasis on the importance of people. Progressive policies and initiatives based on trust of and respect for employees, right? And that's usually evidence of a people first orientation, policies, practices. So human dignity is highly valued, and their policies and procedures are designed accordingly around people rather than implementing, right? You see a lot of older corporations, not necessarily older, but you see a lot of corporations who, that's where they start out. Oh, we need all these policies and procedures, and then their people need to fit within those. So that's been flipped on its head as well. This is just an example. APTN has been recognized as one of Canada's top 100 employers and Manitoba's top employers because of its commitment to people and people first policies and benefits. You can see a few on here. I'm not sure how legible that is, but they provide new mothers with maternity and parental leave top-up payments, right? They ensure employees can access support for health-related concerns by providing access on-demand access to best doctors, etc. Along with helping employees save for the longer term, they contribute to defined contribution pension plans for every employee. So these are just some examples of people first policies. And then the fourth characteristic, cooperative problem solving. So companies are valuing employees who will work together to solve problems, right? And employees are given the freedom to design and implement solutions within their parameters, within their work areas, relying on management to provide that overall vision, right? But then they're kind of left alone to do the work. And that's where you see in that kind of environment, they're not afraid to make as many mistakes, because mistakes indicate efforts to problem solve, right? So we're seeing this whole climate being shifted from, oh, we're not going to take a chance because we're afraid to fail, to a lot more vulnerability coming into it and a lot more trust in people. And I think that's why we've seen the trust in CEOs and employers go up, is because of the shift toward trusting your people and giving them, I guess, the freedom to do what they need to do as their role, be trusted in their role. And then there's one more, characteristic 5, last one. Organizations build relationships with all their public based on mutual respect. So, and also trust in human dignity, right? Not just self-interest or gain. These relationships foster an environment where community members seek solutions where all participants win. So that's when we talk about mutually beneficial outcomes. The community begins to look out for the best interest of the organization because it's in the community's best interest for the organization to thrive. So then you're seeing that two-way mutual benefit. So, but what does it all mean?
What does it all mean?
End with a meme because it gets real serious, and then I have
This is what Melody always contributes to the presentation. I do all the labor. She tosses in the memes. So
okay, that's a lie. Just first of all, that's a lie.
So we're actually just ending towards the end of our presentation, and if we kind of dial back to the very top of the presentation, we talk about how relationship is at the heart. The heart of communication work is relationship building, and brand is everything. It is about that relationship. It is about how that relationship is communicated. It is about building trust and building a trusting image, and about turning and converting those raving those customers into raving fans about your brand, right? And to do that, you need to follow all of those characteristics that we aligned or that we're seeing in terms of building strategic cooperatives. And some, you see that in the trends, right? If you're kind of like seeing all those trends and those characteristics, and you're working towards building that inside your organization, then eventually people will start, consuming your product and consuming your brands. And, you see examples again, like Apple, they have, they always promote their ESG, environmental, social, or ESG reports. I cannot remember the actual definition right now. My apologies. But they promote all their environmental efforts with their products, right? They go on the stage and they say, well, this, we recycled this many iPhones and we use that material in this new iPhone, and people all applaud and clap their hands, and they're all becoming raving fans because of the brand story, right? But it's these kinds of initiatives that when they're following or aligning themselves with what the community wants and what the values want, that turns into trust and relationship building, right? So relationship building is at the heart of of communication, about building trust and storytelling your brand. That is that is the most important thing to take away in all of this, right? So, what is needed in terms of, corporate communication and building trust and storytelling is, returning to the roots of human communication, right? And, and that focuses on personal trust and mutual cooperation, right? When we are engaging, interpersonally with, person to person, culture to culture, we are not always, but I was gonna say we all strive to making, building personal trust and mutual cooperation, but in some cases that's not always true when it comes to some, say, political some figures. But when it comes to relationship building, that's built on mutual cooperation and trust, right? And so organizations have to approach relationship building with their publics in the same way, right? So yeah, that's our wrap up. We're about done 5 minutes early, and we're happy now to take questions or to have further conversation about storytelling your brand, trust, relationship building. Yeah,